Am I the a-hole for taking my own vacation even though I was expected to babysit at my sister's destination wedding? I never thought I'd end up in this situation, but here I am, questioning if I did the right thing. For some background, I'm 27, and my older sister, Claire, is 32. She recently got married in a beautiful destination wedding at a luxury resort in Mexico. Sounds amazing, right? Well, it would have been, if I had actually gone. Claire has always been the golden child. She's beautiful, successful, and the firstborn, so naturally, my parents dote on her. She was the one who got the big sweet 16 party while I got a family dinner at Olive Garden. She got a brand new car at 18, while I got my mom's old minivan with a broken AC. I never really resented her for it. It wasn't her fault our parents favored her, but I always knew where I stood in the family hierarchy. When Claire got engaged, she started planning this dream wedding at a fancy resort. I was genuinely happy for her and excited about the trip. But of course, nothing is ever as simple as it seems with my family. The issue came up a few weeks before the wedding when Claire made it clear that she expected me to babysit her two kids, 5 and 3, the entire weekend. Now, before anyone asks, I don't have kids, and I am not a nanny. I work in marketing and have a demanding job. I love my nephew and niece, but I never signed up to be their full-time caretaker, especially not at what was supposed to be a vacation for me. But Claire and my parents seemed to think otherwise. It started subtly at first. When Claire mentioned the wedding, she kept emphasizing how nice it would be for me to bond with the kids. She'd say things like, "The kids just adore you, and they'd be so much more comfortable with you than a stranger. It'll be such a great way for you to practice for when you have your own someday. Mom and Dad will be so busy with the wedding stuff, and Jake's family isn't really great with kids." At first, I thought she just meant I'd be watching them here and there, like keeping an eye on them during dinner or helping them get ready in the mornings. No big deal, right? But then, a few weeks before the wedding, Claire sent me a detailed itinerary. And guess what? It wasn't my itinerary. It was a babysitting schedule. She had planned out the entire trip for me, but instead of relaxing on the beach or sipping margaritas, my days were filled with things like watching the kids while the bridal party got ready, keeping them entertained during the welcome brunch, taking them back to the hotel room for naps while everyone else went to the bachelorette boat party, feeding them dinner and putting them to bed while everyone attended the rehearsal dinner, keeping them occupied during the actual wedding so Claire wouldn't have to stress. Oh, and the kicker? I wasn't even invited to half of the events. While the other guests would be enjoying a sunset cruise or spa day, I'd be stuck in a hotel room with 2 toddlers. I was furious. I called Claire and told her that this was not what I signed up for. Her response? "Oh, come on, it's not that big of a deal. You love the kids, and this way, you can still be part of everything without all the stress." Excuse me? What stress? I tried to stand my ground. I told her I was happy to help a little, but I wasn't about to spend thousands of dollars just to be a free babysitter. She got annoyed and said, "Well, Mom and Dad already booked your room, and the kids are counting on you, so you can't just back out now." That's when I realized, I never actually agreed to any of this. I checked the hotel reservation, and sure enough, it was a shared suite, with the kids. Meaning, even at night, I wouldn't get a break. So, I made a decision. I wasn't going. I called my parents and told them I wasn't coming. They freaked out. My mom called me selfish, saying Claire needed me, and that family helps family. My dad was more passive-aggressive, saying, "Well, if you don't want to be part of your sister's special day, I guess that's your choice." But I stood firm. I told them I had already put in my PTO, and I planned to take a real vacation instead. And that's exactly what I did. Instead of flying to Mexico for the wedding, I booked myself a solo trip to the Bahamas. A beautiful beachfront resort, spa days, and not a single screaming child in sight. The day of the wedding, I posted a picture of myself lounging by the pool with a cocktail in hand, captioned, "Finally, a stress-free vacation." That's when the real chaos began. Within an hour of posting that picture, my phone exploded with messages. First, it was my mom. "How dare you? You're embarrassing the family. Your sister is crying on her wedding day because of you." Then Claire. "Are you serious right now? You're so selfish. I needed you, and you just abandoned me? What is wrong with you?" Even my dad, who usually stays out of drama, sent a disappointed text. "I hope this vacation was worth ruining your relationship with your sister." At first, I ignored them. I was too busy enjoying my peaceful vacation, something I wouldn't have been able to do if I had gone along with their ridiculous plan. But the messages just kept coming. Apparently, without me there, Claire and Jake had to scramble to find a last-minute babysitter at the resort, which wasn't cheap. They ended up hiring a nanny service, and since it was so last-minute, the price was outrageous. My mom later let it slip that they had to shell out almost $1,000 just to cover the kids for the weekend. Claire was furious because she had to spend that money instead of putting it toward their honeymoon. My parents were angry because they had expected me to do my part as a good sister. But here's the thing, I never agreed to be a free nanny. I decided to finally respond to the family group chat, keeping it short and simple. I never agreed to babysit. You assumed. That's your problem, not mine. I took my own vacation because I deserved one. Hope the wedding was great. See you when I see you. Then I muted the chat and went back to sipping my cocktail. That should have been the end of it. But of course, it wasn't. A few days later, when I got home, my parents invited me over for dinner. I knew what was coming, but I figured I'd at least hear them out. Sure enough, the second I walked in, my mom let me have it. Do you have any idea how much stress you caused? Claire's wedding was supposed to be perfect, and you ruined it. I calmly reminded her that the only reason there was stress was because Claire tried to dump her kids on me without asking. You should have been there for your sister. Why did you have to be so selfish? You could have just helped out for a few days. Was that too much to ask? I asked them a simple question. Would you have asked any other guest at the wedding to miss events and babysit? Or is that just an expectation because I'm the younger sister? Silence. My dad awkwardly cleared his throat. My mom looked flustered. Claire just glared at me. That's different, my mom finally said. You're family. And family helps family. Funny, I said. Because when I needed a break, none of you seemed to care. The silence from Claire and my parents lasted a few days, but I knew the tension wasn't going to die down. Sure enough, a week after the dinner, I got a Venmo request from Claire for $1,050. The note said, "Your share of the babysitter costs since you bailed on your responsibility." I stared at the screen for a few seconds, wondering if I was being punked. She was actually charging me for her last-minute babysitter. I thought about it for a moment and then burst out laughing, loud enough to make my dog bark. She was seriously trying to bill me. I declined the request immediately, but then I had a moment of clarity. I had to respond. So I sent her a text. Lamau. You're joking, right? To no surprise, she was not joking. She texted back immediately, demanding that I pay up since she was forced to get an outside nanny because I couldn't keep my commitment. She went on about how her wedding day was ruined and how nobody else in the family would have done what I did. I didn't even bother arguing at first. I simply sent her. I never agreed to babysit. You assumed. That's your problem, not mine. Don't ever send me a bill again. Then, because I was feeling particularly bold, I also blocked her on Venmo, just to make sure she couldn't try again. That didn't sit well with her. Less than an hour later, my mom called me in a panic, asking why I was being so stubborn and if I was really going to let this become an issue over a small amount of money. Just pay it, and we'll move on. It'll save everyone the stress, my mom said. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The entire family expected me to pay for Claire's bad planning and guilt-tripping me into attending a wedding I didn't want to go to. I asked my mom, would you have paid if the situation was reversed? If I had pulled the same stunt on you, would you have thought I was being reasonable? She went quiet. After a long pause, she said, "That's not the point. You're making this a bigger deal than it needs to be." I could tell she was getting frustrated, but honestly, I was done being the family doormat. So I just told her, "I'm not paying. I didn't cause this problem," and I hung up. The next day, my aunt called me. My mom had apparently gone off on her about what had happened. My aunt, who's very close to my mom, was the one who called me with the guilt trip this time. "Look, honey, I get that you felt hurt, but weddings are stressful. Do you really want to hold on to this grudge?" I told her the same thing I'd told everyone else. I'm not holding a grudge. I'm just not going to let my sister and parents treat me like I'm some sort of unpaid babysitter. This isn't about holding on to something, it's about standing up for myself. She sighed deeply and tried to make me see it from Claire's perspective, but at that point, I was just too tired of hearing the same arguments. I had finally spoken my truth, and it was starting to feel really good. It wasn't long after that, maybe a few days, when Claire sent me a long message. It felt like one of those final ultimatum texts that you get from someone who's hurt and angry but doesn't want to admit it. She started with a whole paragraph about how hurt she was, and how selfish I had been. But then, as if to soften the blow, she included some self-reflection. She wrote, "Maybe I didn't communicate things well, and I see now how you could have felt cornered into being my personal nanny. But you need to understand that I was under a lot of stress, and I really thought you would come through for me." I read that part a couple of times. It almost seemed like she was apologizing. But it didn't quite feel like a true apology. It felt more like she was trying to cover herself, so she could justify expecting me to take on the role of the helpful sister while also maintaining some semblance of control over the situation. Then she dropped this bombshell. "You're being stubborn, and I don't know how long I can forgive you for this. You've let me down in a way I can't forget, and I really need you to take responsibility for your actions." And then it hit me, she wasn't sorry for what she did. She was sorry that I didn't just roll over and take the blame for her poor planning. She was mad that I had set a boundary, and it was making her feel uncomfortable. I decided it was time to get everything off my chest. I knew the text would be hard to send, but I also knew I couldn't just let her steamroll me anymore. I typed back. "I didn't let you down. I just didn't play along with the fantasy you tried to create for your wedding. You didn't ask me to help, you assumed I would. And that's not how it works. I love your kids, but I'm not responsible for them, especially not in the way you're expecting. You made the decision to have a destination wedding, and that comes with its own complications. That's not on me." I paused before hitting send, thinking about what she might say. But then I realized it didn't matter. I had to say what was true for me. I hit send. The next few hours were tense. I was holding my breath, waiting for the explosion. But instead, I got a short, cold response. "Fine. I see where you stand." That was it. No more follow-up. No more discussion. Just silence. My phone stayed quiet for the next few days. I didn't reach out, and neither did Claire. I was fully prepared for the relationship to change. I figured this might be the end of things, and in a way, it felt like a big loss. But at the same time, I couldn't help feeling like a weight had been lifted. A few days later, I was at home when I got an unexpected call. It was from my dad. Now, my dad is usually the more laid-back one, so when he calls in the middle of a tense family situation, I always get a little nervous. I picked up. "Hey, kiddo. How's it going?" His voice was calm, but I could sense there was something else. After some small talk, he dropped the bomb. "Claire's really hurt by everything that's happened. She's been in a bad place over it." I took a deep breath, preparing myself. "I know, Dad. I've already talked to her about it. I can't keep letting her walk all over me just because she's the older sister. I get it. But you need to understand that this isn't just about you and her. This is about the whole family." I knew where this was headed. My dad was trying to mediate, as usual. But I wasn't about to budge. "Dad, I love Claire. But I'm not going to play the role she wants me to play. I've done it for years, and I'm done. I can't be the one who always sacrifices." There was a pause on the other end of the line. My dad sighed. "I know. But I just wish this didn't have to be so complicated." I took a breath, trying to stay calm. "I wish that too, Dad. But sometimes the only way to make things right is to set boundaries. And I'm not going to apologize for doing that." There was more silence. "Okay, kiddo. I just wanted you to hear me out. Don't shut us out, okay?" I told him I wouldn't, but honestly, I wasn't sure if I'd ever be able to repair the damage between me and Claire. The next few days were a blur of silence and awkward tension. I didn't hear from Claire at all, and my parents didn't bring her up either. It was like they were waiting for me to break. But I didn't. I felt more centered than I had in a long time. I went back to my normal routine, work, hanging out with friends, and most importantly, enjoying my personal time. No more worrying about babysitting, no more feeling like I had to sacrifice my own happiness for the sake of family. It felt incredibly freeing. But of course, that kind of peace doesn't last forever. A week after my conversation with my dad, I got a text from Claire's husband, Jake. It was short. "Can we talk?" I was hesitant. What did he want? But I knew it wasn't fair to leave him hanging, especially since I'd known him for years and he'd always been kind to me. So I agreed to call him. We chatted for a while about nothing in particular before he finally got to the point. "Claire is really struggling with this. She feels like you've abandoned her, and it's tearing her apart. She really wants to be close to you, but this whole thing has put a huge distance between you both." I stayed quiet for a moment, thinking. It was hard to hear that because, honestly, I did care about Claire. I wanted to have a healthy relationship with her, but at what cost? I told Jake the same thing I'd told my dad. I love Claire, but I can't keep being the person who gets walked on. I've been there for her through everything, her pregnancies, her tough moments, all of it. But this was just too much. I can't keep sacrificing my own peace for the sake of her convenience. Jake was quiet for a moment, then he said, I get it. I do. And I'm not trying to invalidate your feelings. But Claire really needs her sister right now, and I'm asking you to think about what this is doing to her. You know she's always had a lot of pressure on her shoulders, and maybe this was the tipping point for her. I wanted to say something back, but I didn't know if I had it in me to dive into that conversation with him. I just sighed and said, I hear you, Jake. But I've already made my decision. I can't keep putting myself in the same situation, where I feel like I'm always the one expected to make all the sacrifices. Jake didn't push any further after that, but I could feel the weight of the conversation hanging in the air. As much as I tried to set boundaries, I also knew that this was starting to affect not just Claire and me, but the entire family dynamic. I couldn't help but wonder if I had made a mistake, if there was a way to fix it, without completely bending to Claire's will. Over the next few weeks, the tension in the family didn't exactly go away, but it did feel like we all started to settle into our new roles. Claire, however, still hadn't reached out. It was clear that she was hurt, and probably angry, too, but I wasn't sure if she'd ever get past it. I kept thinking about what my mom had said, family helps family. But helping shouldn't mean being taken advantage of. One evening, I got a call from my mom. I could tell from the tone in her voice that she was trying to get me to talk to Claire again. Honey, please. I know things are rough, but I'm asking you to reach out to your sister. She needs you, and we need you to be there for her. This whole thing is tearing us apart. I felt a pit in my stomach. It wasn't that I didn't care, it was just that I was exhausted from constantly being the one to patch things up. After everything I'd been through, I just wasn't sure I had the energy to continue being the mediator for a family that wasn't respecting my boundaries. But of course, I couldn't just ignore my mom. She's still my mom, and I felt guilty for not trying to mend things. So, I texted Claire. Hey, I know things are strained between us. I want you to know that I love you, but I need you to understand that I can't be the person you expect me to be. I need space to figure out how I can still be there for you, without feeling like I'm losing myself in the process. Let's talk when we're both ready. It wasn't an apology, but it was the best I could do. The days that followed felt like a strange kind of limbo. I had reached out to Claire, but she hadn't responded. I kept telling myself that maybe she just needed time, that maybe she would eventually come around, but deep down, I wasn't so sure. One night, a few days after I sent that text, I received a message from Claire's daughter, Lily. She was the oldest of the two kids, and we'd always had a special bond. She texted, "And, I miss you. Mommy is sad, and I don't understand why you aren't talking to her. Can you come visit soon? I miss playing with you." That hit me hard. I hadn't realized how much Lily was feeling the fallout from all of this. Kids pick up on more than we give them credit for, and the fact that she was reaching out made my heart ache. But at the same time, it made me more determined to stick to my boundaries. I couldn't be the aunt who just jumped in whenever Claire needed me. That would set a dangerous precedent, and I knew it wasn't healthy for me or for Lily in the long run. I replied, "I miss you too, Lily. I love you lots. I promise I'll visit soon, but I need some time to figure things out with Mommy, okay? I know it's confusing, but I'm not upset with you, I'm just taking some time to make sure everything is okay. I hope you understand." Lily didn't reply right away, and I wasn't sure if I had said the right thing. But it felt like a balance. I was acknowledging her feelings without completely giving in to the pressure to fix everything all at once. A couple of days later, I got another text from Claire. This one was different. It was long and emotional. She apologized for the way she had handled everything. She admitted that she had been selfish in assuming I would drop everything for her wedding. She said that she had been under so much stress and had just wanted everything to go perfectly, and in doing so, she'd put too much on me. She even said she understood why I needed a break and that she had taken me for granted. It felt like a genuine apology, and part of me wanted to just forgive her immediately. But the other part of me, the part that had been burned over the years, was hesitant. I wasn't sure if this was just another temporary resolution that would only last as long as it took for her to need something else from me. Still, it meant a lot that she had acknowledged what I was feeling, even if it didn't erase the past. I took a deep breath before replying. "Thank you for the apology, Claire. I really appreciate it. I've thought a lot about everything, and I still stand by my decision. I love you, but I need to make sure I'm not putting myself last anymore. I hope you can understand that." She responded almost immediately. "I do understand. I'm sorry again for all of this. I'll give you the space you need. But I do hope we can find a way to move forward. You're my sister, and I don't want to lose you." That was the first time in a while that I felt like there might be hope for our relationship again. It wasn't perfect, and I didn't know exactly how things would go from here, but it was a step in the right direction. I decided to take the next few weeks slowly. I didn't rush any reconciliation. I kept my distance, but I also kept the door open. I visited Lily when I could, and I made it clear that I wasn't shutting them out, I was just taking care of myself. Claire and I eventually spoke on the phone a few times, but it was mostly surface level at first. The conversations felt a little awkward, but they weren't filled with tension anymore, and that was progress. By the time the holidays rolled around, I had a conversation with my parents about it all. I explained that I wasn't asking them to take sides, but I needed them to respect my decision to set boundaries with Claire. My dad was actually more understanding than I expected. He admitted that he didn't realize how much pressure Claire had been putting on me over the years, and he said he was proud of me for standing up for myself. Mom was a little slower to come around, but eventually, she accepted that I needed to take care of my own well-being. As for Claire, we didn't jump back to being best friends right away, but we did find common ground again. It wasn't perfect, and we still had some things to work through, but I finally felt like I was being heard. And that was something I hadn't felt in a long time. I still wasn't sure what the future held for our relationship, but for the first time, I felt hopeful. I had stood up for myself, set the boundaries I needed, and still left space for the possibility of mending things with Claire, on my terms. And that, for me, was a huge win. The holidays passed, and while things had improved with Claire, there was still a lingering tension. I could feel it, like an unspoken weight between us, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go down. It wasn't until New Year's Eve that the bombshell dropped. I was at a party with some friends, enjoying the night, when I got a message from Claire. It was a voice memo, and I was curious but hesitant to listen. I knew I wasn't ready for a heavy conversation, but I couldn't ignore it either. I clicked play. Claire's voice was uncharacteristically fragile. "I know we've been talking a little more, but there's something I need to get off my chest. I don't know if you can forgive me for this, but I've been thinking about what happened with the wedding, and, well, I didn't just ask you to babysit because I thought you'd say yes. There was something else. Something I've never told you." My heart dropped. What was she talking about? She continued, her voice cracking. "The truth is, I was hoping you'd come out to help with the kids because I wanted you there for me. I wanted you to be the one who stepped up when I needed someone. You know how hard things have been for me lately. I've been feeling like I can't keep my life together, and the wedding was supposed to be a fresh start. But I guess I've been afraid. Afraid that I'm losing you, and I didn't know how to say it." The voice memo ended abruptly, and for a moment, I didn't know what to do. This was more than just about babysitting. This was about something deeper, something Claire hadn't said out loud until now. My phone buzzed with a text. "I'm sorry. I don't know if you'll understand, but I just need you to know that I was scared." I felt this strange rush of emotions, anger, sadness, and even a little bit of sympathy. I had always known Claire was dealing with a lot, but this confession changed everything. Was I angry at her for putting me in that position? Yes. But was I also feeling something else, something more personal? Maybe. I didn't want to respond immediately. I knew I had to process everything. So, I took a deep breath, enjoyed the rest of my night, and tried to block out the nagging feeling that Claire's words had stirred up. The next morning, hungover and still processing everything, I decided to finally text Claire back. I wasn't ready to dive into anything too intense just yet, but I knew we needed to address it. "I don't know what to say, Claire. I've been thinking a lot about what you said. You can't keep putting everything on me, but I get that you were scared. I don't know if I'm ready to forgive you completely, but I need time." Her response came almost instantly, "I get it. I'm not asking for you to forgive me right away. But I hope we can figure this out, even if it takes time. I really do miss you, and I want to work on this." For the first time, I didn't feel like I was the one doing all the emotional labor. She was owning her stuff. It was a small step, but it felt like something significant. But then, just when things started to feel like they were on the mend, the real drama unfolded. A few days later, I was at brunch with some friends when I got an unexpected call from Jake. Well, it was awkward, but I picked up anyway. "Hey, I hope you're doing well. I wanted to talk to you about something, and I need to be upfront about it." Oh, God. I knew where this was going. "Look, I don't know if Claire told you this yet, but she's been talking to some of her friends about the wedding and, well, she's been saying that you almost ruined everything by pulling the babysitting stunt." I froze. What? After all this progress, after the emotional heart-to-heart, she was saying that to her friends? "I'm not asking you to take sides or get involved in any drama," Jake said quickly. "But I just thought you should know. She's been saying that she was forced to pick between you and the wedding, and that you made things worse than they already were." I sat there, digesting what Jake had just said. I felt a sudden anger rise in me. I had barely made it through the emotional aftermath of the wedding, and now, after Claire had apologized, she was turning it around and making me the villain again. "Jake, I'm honestly done with this. I've tried to make peace, I've tried to move forward, and now she's talking about me like I was some kind of problem at the wedding? I'm not going to be the scapegoat here." Jake was silent for a moment, and I could tell he was weighing his words. Finally, he spoke up. "Look, I didn't want to get caught in the middle of all this, but Claire's been under a lot of stress. She's not in a good place, and she's taking it out on the wrong people. But I'm asking you to try and understand. She's hurting, and she doesn't know how to fix it." I didn't know what to say. Was this about the wedding or was this something deeper? I ended the call with a simple, "Thanks for telling me," but my mind was racing. Was I expected to keep coming to Claire's rescue, or was this her own mess to handle? The next few days were a whirlwind of emotions. I found myself replaying Jake's words over and over in my head, trying to make sense of everything. Part of me understood that Claire was struggling, but it also felt like she was trying to make me the villain in a situation where she was the one who had set it all in motion. It felt unfair. I decided to take a step back from the situation. I didn't need to keep making myself available to fix everything for her, especially if she was just going to twist things around. My friends noticed the shift in my mood, but they were supportive. They understood that I had to stand firm in my boundaries. Then, a few days later, I got another message. This time, it wasn't from Claire. It was from one of her friends, who I'll call Sarah. I hadn't talked to Sarah much, but we'd always gotten along fine. Her message was blunt. "Hey, I heard what happened with you and Claire. She's been venting to all of us about the situation, and honestly, we're all shocked by how you handled it. I get that you're upset, but don't you think you could have been a little more supportive? She's your sister. We all know how much stress she's been under, and you bailed." I stared at the screen, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Did I want to engage with this? Did I even owe Sarah an explanation? I decided to reply, but I wasn't going to hold back. "Look, Sarah. I get that Claire's going through a lot, but I've been there for her through everything. I've supported her, sacrificed my time, and been her emotional backup for years. But at some point, I need to take care of myself. I didn't bail on her. I set a boundary. It's not my job to be her emotional crutch every time she gets overwhelmed." I hit send, and waited for the inevitable response. Sarah didn't take long to reply. "I get where you're coming from, but it just feels like you're punishing Claire for needing help. You're her sister. She shouldn't have to feel like she's walking on eggshells around you." It stung, but I was done second-guessing myself. I knew what I needed. I wasn't punishing her, I was simply demanding. I typed back. "Maybe I've been the one walking on eggshells for too long. I'm done sacrificing my happiness for the sake of keeping the peace." I didn't hear back from Sarah, but that didn't surprise me. It wasn't my job to make her or anyone else understand. This was between me and Claire. That evening, I finally called Claire. I'd been avoiding it for a while, but I knew that we needed to clear the air. I didn't want to be the villain in her story, but I also couldn't keep playing the role of the martyr. When Claire picked up, her voice was quieter than usual. "Hey." "Hey," I said, trying to keep things calm. "I got a message from Jake, and I know you've been talking to Sarah. I want to know what you're telling people about me." There was a long pause, and then she responded with a bit of hesitation. "I didn't mean for it to come out that way. I don't know how to fix things between us, and I've been telling them how hurt I am. I never wanted you to feel like you're a villain in this." I could hear the guilt in her voice. But it wasn't enough. She was still deflecting, still trying to place the blame elsewhere. "Claire, I don't want to be your villain either, but you have to understand that this isn't just about me bailing on you. It's about me needing to protect myself from being constantly asked to put everyone else's needs before my own. I've done it for so long, and I'm not going to do it anymore." There was another long pause, and when she spoke again, her voice was choked with emotion. "I'm sorry. I'm really sorry for everything. I didn't mean to put you in that position. I've just been so overwhelmed, and I guess I didn't think about how it would affect you." I felt a mix of relief and anger. Relief because she was finally admitting that she had messed up, but angry because it had taken so long for her to realize it. "I don't know if I can forgive you right now, but I'm not saying I won't. I just need you to respect the fact that I need space. I'm not your scapegoat." There was silence on the other end for a while. I knew she was processing everything. Finally, Claire spoke. "I understand. I'll respect your space. And I'll work on being better, not just for you, but for myself too." I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It wasn't the perfect resolution, but it was progress. A week later, Claire invited me to her house for a family dinner. I wasn't sure if I was ready to step back into that space, but I agreed. The evening was quiet at first. There were no big apologies or dramatic confrontations. It was awkward, but in the best way possible, like we were both treading carefully, but moving toward a healthier place. Halfway through the dinner, Claire reached across the table and touched my hand. "I know we've had our issues, and I'm sorry for everything. But I want you to know that I love you. I miss my sister." I squeezed her hand back, finally feeling like the gap between us had begun to close. It wasn't perfect, and there was still work to do, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were moving forward in the right direction. But just when I thought things were finally settling down, the real drama reared its head. The dinner ended uneventfully, or so I thought. Everyone was in good spirits by the time dessert was served, and there was a general sense of calm in the air. Claire and I shared a few small laughs, and I could almost convince myself that things were back to normal. But I wasn't naive enough to think it would stay that way forever. That night, as I was about to head home, Claire's phone rang. She didn't answer, but she glanced at the screen, and I noticed her face freeze. I didn't think much of it until she excused herself for a second and stepped out of the room to take the call. The tension in the air grew thick. Something felt off, but I tried to brush it aside. After everything we'd been through, maybe I was just overthinking it. But when she came back, she was visibly shaken. I just got some news. And I don't know what to do with it," Claire said, her voice trembling. I raised an eyebrow, feeling a mix of concern and confusion. "What happened?" I asked. She hesitated for a long moment, clearly debating whether or not to tell me. But then, finally, she spoke. "Mom is sick. It's bad. The doctors don't know how." The words hit me like a ton of bricks. I hadn't expected this. Not at all. Mom? Sick? This was the woman who had always been a pillar of strength, or so it seemed. She'd always been there, in her own chaotic way, and now, suddenly, everything was crashing down. I tried to process it, but all I could think was, why didn't she tell me sooner? Claire wiped her eyes, clearly trying to hold it together, but her facade was slipping. "I just got off the phone with her. She's asking for all of us to come over. I don't even know what to think right now. Everything's a mess." I felt the situation shift in an instant. All of a sudden, the petty squabbles, the tension, the misunderstandings, it all seemed so trivial. And yet, at the same time, I couldn't ignore the underlying frustrations that had been simmering between Claire and me. We both stood there, silent for a few seconds, processing the gravity of the news. And then Claire did something that completely threw me off guard. She grabbed my arm, and in a moment of desperation, said, "I need you. I need you to come with me. I don't know how to handle this. I can't do it alone. Please." I wasn't sure how to respond. On one hand, I knew I should be there for her. Family is family, after all, right? But on the other hand, I couldn't help but feel this deep resentment bubbling up again. This was the same woman who had ignored my feelings, who had made me feel like a backup option, and now she wanted me to drop everything for her yet again. I took a deep breath, my mind swirling. The emotional toll of the past few months had taken so much out of me. I wasn't sure if I had the strength to dive back into the role of emotional caretaker. "Claire, I'm sorry. I can't just jump in and fix everything right now. I need time. I'm still processing a lot of what's happened between us." Her face fell. The hurt in her eyes was almost too much to bear. But I had to stay firm. I had to protect myself from being dragged into her emotional storm, as much as I cared for her. "I get it," she whispered. "I do. I just don't know what to do. I feel so lost right now." I wanted to help. I really did. But in that moment, I knew I had to walk away. I couldn't be the one to save her every time. It wasn't healthy for either of us. "I'm sorry. I really am. But I just can't." "Not right now," I said, my voice thick with emotion. I didn't wait for her response. I walked out of the house, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on me. But I also felt this strange sense of clarity. For once, I had stayed true to myself. The following days were a blur. Claire didn't reach out much. I think she was dealing with her own emotions, processing her mom's health scare, but part of me also wondered if she was upset with me. Did she feel like I was abandoning her again? Was this the point where she would decide she couldn't count on me? I didn't know what to expect, but I wasn't willing to chase her. I'd done enough chasing over the years. This time, the ball was in her court. And then, a week later, I got the call. It was from Claire's mom, and I knew instantly something had changed. She told me she wanted to see me, that it was important. The urgency in her voice was unmistakable. I hesitated. What was going on? Had things gotten worse with Claire's mom? Was I being called in for some kind of family intervention? I couldn't avoid it any longer. I had to face the music. Whatever had been festering under the surface had to come to a head. I drove over to Claire's mom's house the next morning, unsure of what exactly awaited me. The drive felt long, and with each passing minute, my mind raced through all the possible reasons why she might want to speak to me. When I got there, the door was open, and Claire's mom was sitting on the couch. She looked frail, more so than I'd ever seen her. Her usual fiery presence was diminished, replaced with a quiet, almost resigned calm. "You made it," she said softly, giving me a small, tired smile. I nodded, still unsure of what this meeting was about. I could feel the tension in the room, and the familiar unease that always seemed to settle between Claire and me whenever we faced something real. I sat down carefully across from her, my legs restless beneath me. She sighed deeply before speaking. "I'm not sure if Claire's told you, but my health has taken a sharp decline. The doctors are talking about options. We're at a crossroads, and the family needs to figure out what comes next." I swallowed, my heart sinking. This was worse than I expected. Claire had only hinted at her mom's condition, but hearing the gravity of it out loud, seeing her mom look so fragile, was a wake-up call. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "I had no idea things were that serious." She waved her hand dismissively. "I'm not asking for pity, but I am asking for something. And I know this might not be easy for you, but I need your help. Not just as Claire's sister, but as someone who's always been there, whether you've realized it or not." My throat tightened. It felt like there was an unspoken weight behind her words, something deeper. My initial instinct was to shut down. To tell her I couldn't be the one to carry everything for everyone anymore. But she kept looking at me, and her eyes weren't asking for sympathy, they were asking for something real. "Claire and I have had our differences," she continued, "but this whole situation, it's brought a lot of things to the surface. I've always known you were strong, but now more than ever, I need to know you'll be there. Not just for Claire, but for me." I felt my chest tighten. There it was again. Everyone asking me to step in, to hold it together. But I didn't feel strong. I felt like I was at the edge of exhaustion, barely holding on to my own sense of self. And here was her mom, essentially handing me the responsibility of holding the family together again. "I'm not sure what you're asking," I said quietly. "I can't fix this. I can't fix everything." Her gaze softened. "I'm not asking you to fix anything. I'm asking you to stand with us. To be part of this family, as messy as it is. We need your presence, your grounding. You've always been the glue, whether you see it or not." Her words hung in the air, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper was happening here. It wasn't just about me helping Claire or stepping in for the sake of the family. It was about accepting my role in this, whatever that might look like, and confronting the complicated relationships that had always existed between us. For a long moment, I didn't speak. I just stared at Claire's mom, trying to process everything she had said. But then, just as I was about to speak, the door opened, and Claire walked in. Her eyes immediately locked with mine. The tension between us was palpable, but this time, it felt different. There was no shouting, no cold silence, just a quiet, uncertain understanding. She looked at her mom, then at me, before sitting down next to her. For a second, we all just sat there in silence, unsure of what to say next. But something in the air felt fragile. We all knew that this conversation, whatever direction it took, was going to change everything. Claire broke the silence first. "I know you're probably upset with me, but I don't know how to do this without you." I glanced at her mom, who gave me a small, almost apologetic smile. I could feel the weight of the situation, the magnitude of what was unfolding. I turned to Claire, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a moment of clarity. This wasn't just about the wedding or the past few months. This wasn't even about me being angry at her for the way she treated me. It was about being there for each other, in a way that didn't involve old patterns of sacrifice, resentment, or guilt. I took a deep breath, trying to settle the churning thoughts in my mind. "I don't know what's going to happen from here on out," I began slowly. "But I'm not going to pretend like everything is okay, and I'm not going to just pick up where we left off. I need things to change. I need boundaries. But I will be here, for both of you. We can figure this out, one step at a time." There was a long silence. I could see both of them processing my words, taking in what I was offering. Finally, Claire spoke softly. "That's all I need. I don't need you to carry it all. I just need you to stand with me." I nodded, feeling a small sense of relief. Maybe this could work. Maybe we could find a way to be there for each other without the old dynamics getting in the way. And just as I thought the moment had passed, Claire's mom turned to me with one last, quiet plea. "Thank you. I know this isn't easy, but I'm grateful for you being here." I couldn't help but feel a softening in my chest. For the first time, I wasn't just the caretaker. I wasn't just the one holding everything together. I was just me, with all my own needs and limitations, and that was enough. Over the next few weeks, things began to settle into a new rhythm. It wasn't perfect, and there were still moments of tension, but there was also a sense of understanding that hadn't existed before. Claire and I had more honest conversations than we'd had in years, though they were still difficult at times. I set clear boundaries, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was being asked to sacrifice myself for the sake of family. Claire was trying, really trying, to respect my needs, and I could see how much she was struggling with everything happening with her mom. Her mom's condition remained serious, but there were moments of clarity in the chaos. The whole family had to learn how to adjust, to put aside old grievances and work together, even when it wasn't easy. One afternoon, I received a message from Claire that made me smile. It was a simple text. "Hey, I just wanted to say I love you. Thank you for being here. I'm sorry for everything. I'm going to try harder to be the sister you deserve." I couldn't help but feel a shift. For once, it wasn't just about me trying to fix things. Claire was finally taking responsibility for her part in our dynamic. I didn't expect her to change overnight, but this felt like a step forward. We were learning to navigate this new territory together. A few days later, when Claire's mom was admitted to the hospital for more intensive care, I was there. Not because I was trying to play the martyr, not because I felt obligated, but because I truly wanted to be there. I was ready to support both of them, not as a fixer, but as someone who cared. The family dinner that followed was quieter than usual. But there was a sense of solidarity that had been missing before. It wasn't perfect, and I didn't have all the answers, but for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was in a space where I could truly be myself, while still being there for my sister and her mom in a healthy, balanced way. It wasn't about fixing everything. It wasn't about being the perfect family. It was about showing up, one day at a time, and doing our best. And that, I realized, was enough. Am I the a-hole for stepping back from my sister when she needed me the most? I knew she was going through a lot with her mom's health decline, but I was so burned out from always being the one to hold everything together for the family. I told her I couldn't just keep stepping in as the emotional caretaker without some changes. I needed boundaries, and it felt like I was always being expected to sacrifice my own well-being for her. When her mom got worse, she asked me to come support them, but I wasn't sure if I should drop everything for her again. I decided to go, but only because I felt like it was the right thing to do, and I had set those boundaries. It wasn't easy, and I didn't feel like I should just step back into the role I've always played in the family, but I also didn't want to abandon them. So, am I the a-hole for setting boundaries and not just immediately jumping in to help like I always have? Or should I have been more understanding and stepped in without hesitation? Thank you all for watching. If you found this story interesting, don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories.